All right. I am so excited to introduce Dr. Amanda Freise as our workshop leader for the day. She earned her PhD in molecular and medical pharmacology at UCLA in 2016. As a graduate student, Amanda developed the SciComm 101 series of workshops to train her peers in communicating science more clearly. I can relate to that. And co-founded Signal to Noise magazine, an online science outreach publication, to create opportunities for graduate students to practice writing for a lay audience. Today, Amanda is an associate director of undergraduate research at Microbiology, Immunology, and Molecular Genetics department at UCLA. She's also director of research at the Center for Positive Sexuality. Amanda is a very talented and passionate educator who uses all available technology, including social media, to create the best learning experience for her audiences. I can personally tell you that Amanda is a wonderful and enthusiastic teacher since she was my instructor back at UCLA. And I'm so happy she had time to lead the workshop today. So without further ado, I am handing it over to Amanda.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alice, and thank you so much for inviting me to be here. Give me just a sec to set up my screen here. All right, everybody should be able to see that, but let me know if there are issues. So thank you again for inviting me. I'm so excited to talk about social media for scientists because, as I think you've all probably picked up on by being in this workshop, we really need to find every possible way that we can communicate science, and social media is an excellent way to do that. So a quick overview of what I plan to cover today. We'll talk a little bit about just social media in general and its reach and influence, and that kind of will lead into many of the goals and benefits of using social media as scientists. We will have some hands-on practice time where we can create posts, find communities online in social media that maybe speak to you, and do some networking as well. And then I also want to talk a little bit about considerations that we should have when using social media in general, but especially in a professional sense. So a little bit more about myself before I dive in. I like to describe my career as going from science to sex and back again, because who really knows what they want to be when they grow up anyway, or when they're she and even afterward. So when I was an undergrad at UC Irvine, I majored in genetics, but I also minored in women's studies because I really enjoyed the conversations and the kinds of things we were thinking about in those classes. And then I went on to do my PhD at UCLA in molecular and medical pharmacology. And after I finished my PhD, I was hired as first a lecturer in the microbiology department, and now I'm the associate director of undergraduate research. And so that's just a fancy way of saying that I teach, I do research, and I also do some curriculum development and administration in the department. And I teach some hands-on research courses for undergrads where they can get an authentic research experience in the format of a course. And in addition, because I'm really passionate about sexuality, it's actually the real field that I'm most interested in. I'm also the director of research at the Center for Positive Sexuality, and through this nonprofit, we provide education and we do research as well with a number of research affiliates to essentially better the world through a more understanding and acceptance of our sexuality. So, I have a diverse range of interests and activities, but I feel like I have arrived at a place in my career that I'm really happy to be doing all of these different things. So quick warm up, just to kind of like see how do we feel about social media in general. How do you currently use social media? And this could be, either in a sense of like, just for your personal use, or it could be professional, or both. So I'm gonna have Alice put you in the breakout rooms in just a second. Alice, if you wouldn't mind putting the question in the chat so that we can take it with them, that would be great. So how do we currently use social media? And you can think about which platforms, because there are so many at this point. Do you engage on social media, or are you more of a lurker, kind of just observing, seeing what's going on? Do you use social media in like a public professional sense, or do you just use it in a private way, or personal way? And when you're looking at social media, depending on who or what you're following, what do you find yourself consuming? So let's orient ourselves to our current use of social media before we dive into how to use it as scientists by talking about these questions. We'll take 5 minutes in breakout rooms, and then we'll come back and kind of, I would like each breakout room to sort of like let me know what it is that you talked about. Okay, so let's jump into breakout rooms. Okay, welcome back. So I was in breakout room, and we were having breakout room 1, and I was having a really good discussion. I would love to hear from other rooms. What came up around this? What came up around your current use of social media? Do you like it, not like it? What do you use, public or private? General thoughts. You can feel free to put them in the chat for us to see, or also feel free to unmute yourself and speak up over the mic.
We were all lurkers.
Even in your breakout room or on social media? In
our break. Oh no, we were talking in a breakout room, but
okay,
all the people in the room were lurkers on social media.
Interesting. Okay, so maybe consumption is worthwhile, but and did you talk about maybe why you were lurkers? Is it the energy involved, or the time, or maybe just not feeling interested in participating?
It was a little bit divergent with our answers, like basically feeling that you need to commit full time if you're going to be engaging in social media, and like just using it for news consumption and things like that, and not knowing really what kind of things you want to be putting out.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, it's like I think maybe in a more private sense, we feel comfortable sharing whatever we want to about our personal lives, but when it comes to speaking up more publicly or talking about a topic, it can be hard to know like how to engage or like to what degree. So thank you so much, Michael, for sharing that. I see in the chat many lurkers. Our room, all lurkers. Most people in our room are lurkers because many are concerned with saying the right things. So yeah, that's a fear. I have a little social media anxiety too. Like I better create the perfect post and make sure that I've crafted it and that my message is completely clear. We'll talk a little bit more about that more toward the end. That's something that, as I said, I have to get over too, but it is like diving in a little bit. So we'll talk about that. Or contributing to conversations in a new way. Absolutely, that's a reasonable fear, although I will say too that these conversations are happening all the time, and anything that you have to say is valuable because it's coming from you and it's your unique perspective. So already, just by adding your voice to the conversation, that is adding to it in a new way. From group 7, we had some politics and activism shares. Okay, find events and resources, share cool things with friends. Samuel was the odd duck that abstains from social media. I had a few of those in my group too, so you're not too much of an odd duck. Genesis says, I had a couple of my tweets go viral and I was so anxious about it because suddenly the spotlight is on you. That can be definitely anxiety provoking. That's cool though that they went viral. I wish I knew how to use and harness social media to have a strong network and interact scientifically in a meaningful way. Okay, perfect, you're in the right workshop. We weren't even sure what our goals of being on Twitter were. Yes, perfect. That's what we're going to talk about today. Meme groups on Facebook, graduate memes with relatable themes. Okay, perfect. This is a really good place to start. So I see many lurkers for a variety of reasons, but mostly like maybe not sure how or when to engage, not sure what the goals are here, and maybe like a little bit of anxiety over like posting the right thing. A few of us had science Twitters and we're unsure how personal or political any of our tweets could be. Also reasonable. We can talk about that too. Okay, so thank you so much for adding these things to the chat. It's helpful for me to see where we're all starting. So I've broken up the presentation essentially into kind of like a goal or a few goals at a time. And then in between going through those goals, we will take a little break to practice and talk about setting up aspects of the social media process that will address those goals. So a quick overview of how I got into social media professionally. So when I've always been fascinated by how people communicate, like about all things, about science, with each other, about, within relationships, just how people craft their thoughts and turn that into language or media to get another thought into somebody else's head is really, really interesting. And when I was in grad school, I was a very disgruntled graduate student, which I'm sure many of you are too, because I was realizing in year 2 of like 5.5 of my PhD that I really didn't like being at the bench, and I definitely did not want to go on to become a PI. I was feeling burned out. I didn't like bench work. So because of this, I was like, I need another outlet. I need to find something to get me through the rest of grad school that's going to be motivating for me. And so I kind of combined my interest in science and my interest in communication and found this amazing community of science communicators on Twitter. And it was like, oh, I'm saved because now I can get through the rest of grad school with this community of people that are actually doing something that I find I'm very passionate about, that is like giving me life. And so the Twitter was kind of the thing that got me during my hardest moments of graduate school, knowing that this community existed, not only the people, but also like this entire career path, that was just a relief to know that I could have that to look forward to and to participate in and like commiserate with people about while I was in grad school too. And so all of this goes back to hashtag SciComm. And as I continued through the rest of my PhD and even into being a lecturer and into my position now, I have continued to use social media because there are amazing communities of academics, of scientists who are talking to each other on social media through these communities. So for instance, hashtag PhD chat is a big one. There's also academic Twitter. And these communities are really, really active, and you can use them in a variety of ways. Largely, in this case, I'm referencing them as a source of support. So it's just been nice to have communities who understand. Being in graduate school, being an academic, it can be really isolating. And social media is one way, if you connect with other academics and graduate students, to feel less isolated. So I've continued to use social media in that way. And although I used to do more of my science communication on Twitter, I've now sort of moved over to Instagram because most of the work I'm doing now when it comes to communicating science is in sexuality. And I find that the platform of Instagram seems to work better for that, or it seems like there's more of an audience for that type of work, although Instagram itself, of course, is trying to squash everything that they can that has to do with sex, so that's another story. But anyway, there are a variety of platforms, and I'm going to highlight Twitter for the most part today because I think it's the easiest place to get started in social media as a scientist. But know that there are, as this slide showed, there's so many different platforms, and you can choose ones that you think work best for you or that you're most interested in participating on. So let's do, now that we've talked about how each of you is using or not using social media, let's think about why we would want to use social media as scientists. So what I'm gonna ask you to do is just take 15 seconds to think to yourself. And then after about 15 seconds or so, I'll let you know when that time has gone on. Then just type your responses in the chat and we'll see what you all say. So starting now, 15 seconds. All right, I'll start reading through these. So someone says, papers that are tweeted out get cited more than papers that aren't. True, there is research that supports this. So just by talking about your work on social media, you're going to get more citations potentially. Public communication, yes, sharing our work with the public. Science affects everyone, absolutely. So social media is a great way to get this science out to everyone. Find career opportunities and networking, absolutely. To establish your personal brand. Yes, this isn't something we think about too much as scientists, but like you yourself can, like that is a valuable thing to put out into the world in terms of your career. So you can kind of make yourself a brand. A way to reach non-scientists, absolutely. Recruiting, dissemination of work, helps to build community in a field that can be isolating. To see what other graduate students and academics think is worth yelling into the void. Absolutely. So if you're not sure what to write, see what other people are writing. Keep working, but pay attention specifically, what are my peers saying on social media? Connect with scientists who are studying similar topics. Absolutely, another great way to find academic community. To give back to society, I really like that. We're often trapped in our academic bubble, and the rest of society is just like has no idea what's going on, or how the work that we're doing might affect them. So this is a really good way to kind of share that information and give back. Share science advances with those that don't have a science background. There are so many here. I'm gonna skim through them a little bit. Communicate, connect with other marginalized communities. Excellent. We do want to talk about making our work accessible. We'll go over that at the end. To reach a bigger audience, be the first to know about cool research, cool preprints, absolutely. Find scientists and researchers I wouldn't see otherwise. Celebrate each other's accomplishments and connect people. Awesome, awesome. So to the folks who earlier were like, I don't really know what the goal is of social media, any of these is an excellent goal, any or all. And you can choose the ways that you want to interact on social media, or you can choose the goals that feel most important to you. You don't necessarily have to do all of these things, but there are all options. So when I was in graduate school, starting like 2011, my sense was that social media was like this niche thing for scientists that like only a few weird ones were doing. And the messages that I was getting from the university itself, other faculty, some other students, was kind of the same thing. Like, why would you waste your time on social media? So this is not true. Social media is not a niche thing anymore, because we all live our lives on social media. And therefore, our work is going to be connected to social media, and we should be using this incredible tool and platform that has so much reach to the best of our advantage. So although I'm sure some PIs probably still feel otherwise, this is a powerful tool. And let me convince you. So there's some data here. 68% of Americans get their news from social media. That includes news about science. So just look at all the stuff that's coming out about COVID, true and not true. We have, I argue that we have some responsibility to be a voice on that social media, even to some degree, because we need to lend our expertise to make sure that people who are, seeing the different stories here, like at least let them know that you exist so that you can answer some questions for them. 47% of AAAS members, professional scientists, use social media for science purposes. So scientists are on board. This is getting bigger. And I know that a lot of the platforms that we are going to talk about today might only be accessible in some countries. For instance, I know that some of them aren't accessible in China, but other countries do have their own platforms that you can use to discuss science. So for example, I've read that WeChat is really active for science discussion and any discussion of things in China. So there are a variety of platforms depending on where you live or what your preferences are. Even Nature, I found this collection of articles from the journal Nature, social media for scientists. So even they are saying like, yeah, this is a thing, let's do it. So we've touched on this. Somebody mentioned that papers that get tweeted out actually get cited more often. And it makes sense because social media has this incredible reach. So this is a paper, or a graph from a paper from in 2013. I'm sorry, I keep covering it up there. Where you can see it's in log scale, and this is like the monthly audience that you could expect to reach through these different platforms. Mouse over because I don't want to hide it, but on the left there you can see scientific conferences, like this teeny tiny, little tiny audience. That's the way that most scientists are accustomed to sharing their work, though, is through conferences and journals and maybe talks, but those are pretty insular at a university or something like that. So scientific conference, college class, then it jumps up with something like Scientific American, which is marketed to the general public, but still kind of niche. Things like local and national journalism. But the things at the very, very top with the most visibility, social media, Twitter, blogs, Facebook. And this is from 2013, so I think it's a little outdated, but probably the things at the top now are just other social media platforms like Instagram or something like that. So these social media platforms have exponentially, literally exponentially more reach than our traditional ways of communicating scientific information. Everybody you know, even if you're a lurker, is connected to social media in some way. So just by using these platforms, you're going to be able to make your work more accessible and more visible to everybody. And we should do that. Like, you want your work to be visible. So if it's the year 2020, let's make our work accessible via as many routes as possible, even these so-called non-traditional ones. Alice asked, what types of blogs does it refer to? I'm not sure. We would have to look back at the paper. This paper was published in PLOS Biology, so it might be like sciencey blogs, but I'm actually not sure. I'd have to check on it. And Genesis has linked a more recent study. Thank you so much, Genesis. Awesome. Somebody mentioned earlier that social media is a good way to like find out about the coolest studies right away. Perfect. It's a perfect example. So you can use social media, again, particularly Twitter is where I see a lot of this happening, to see papers as soon as they come out. And of course you can, I know you're looking at the literature in other ways, but if you add this additional way of staying on top of literature into something like social media, if you're using that on a semi-regular basis, this is just another way to quickly see new findings that are coming out as they come out. Another reason, I don't think that this came up, but another reason we might want to use social media is to dispel misconceptions about science and the people that are doing it. So this was a post by someone, I'm not sure if she actually started this movement, but the caption says, some surveys have shown that 2/3 of Americans cannot name a single living scientist, and I have read this is true. And by looking at the list of scientists that were named by the 1/3 who could, most of them were male. And I would hazard to guess that they're probably old, white, straight, cis males as well. So she says she's wearing this shirt proudly. Hello, I'm a woman and scientist. This is what a scientist looks like. Showing people all across the world that, and this went viral. This was huge. So the hashtag, this is what a scientist looks like, became super popular, and everybody was taking pictures of themselves in all kinds of different circumstances just to show each other, like, hey, we exist, but also the general public, hey, like, this is like, the idea that you have of a scientist, like, that's outdated. We're evolving past that. And as a note about dispelling misconceptions about science, same is true for things like all of the COVID myths that come out. There's a lot of bad scientific information that needs dispelling and disproving, and so that's another reason we might want to jump on for this. And finally, or for this first batch of goals, finally, communicating your own work, of course. So this is a really good way for you to showcase all of the amazing work that you're doing in graduate school and beyond. So I've just included a couple of examples here. Warning for a huge spider in the bottom left. This person put together a really nice informative post. She's doing spider research, and she says, here we have some of Australia's largest spiders, a Queensland whistling tarantula and a gray huntsman. Both have venom, but they are harmless to humans. We are studying their venom for potential biomedical applications. And I really like this post because A, we get to see the scientists doing this work. B, the post is kind of interesting because I'm like, whoa, a spider catches my eye. And 3, in this really short tweet, she's taught me something about spiders. If I saw that spider, I would run in the other direction. But now knowing that it's not venomous to me, okay, that makes me feel a little better. So she's really effectively used this super short tweet to share something and teach me something about her research. The post on the right is similar. They've sort of, this is a thread, so they were, there's more to be read, but I just included the first one here. They started off right away telling you, here's my main finding. Here's why it's important. This is really interesting. How did we find out? Keep reading. And then they've included some cool pictures here. So the work that you're doing as graduate students and beyond, this is a great way to communicate it. And it can also be really useful to practice communicating it in this way, because if you only have, for example, on Twitter, 280 characters, it's challenging. It's really challenging to try to break down a really complex project and effectively communicate it in that short character length. So think of this as like an interesting challenge, but one that's actually really useful because it kind of forces you to think about what's another way I can talk about my work? What are really the key findings, and what needs to be said about, like, how do I need to contextualize my work so that anybody on this platform can understand what it is I'm talking about? Okay, I've talked for a little bit, so let's take a break and do some practice. I know that the organizers asked you to create an account already. So if you did, great. If not, go ahead and choose a platform. I was suggesting Twitter because I think it's a really great place to start. And as far as I've read in some studies, Twitter seems to be the most used social media platform by scientists. So you'll find a lot of community there already. But feel free, of course, to use other platforms. So Instagram and Snapchat, if you're really interested in showcasing the visual components of your work, those might be better platforms for you. Facebook has a really wide potential reach, although I don't know that it's any wider than these other ones at this point. And you can make a page on Facebook for yourself, which is sort of an easy way to connect with even more people, because then anybody can see your page rather than creating a profile where you have to accept friends. And TikTok is getting pretty big. If videos are your preferred format, try making a TikTok account. That would be awesome. So beyond making your account and creating your handle, something that we have to think about is how are we going to present ourselves on social media? So we'll take a second, in a second we'll go into breakout rooms, and here is what I'd like you to think about. How do you want to be perceived on public social media? So think of this as like your professional account. Within the context of this professional account as a scientist, how do you want to appear to others? Do you want to seem like stereotypically professional, where you're like, only talking about the science and like very polished? Or do you want to make it a little bit more personal and like admit to, the ins and outs of your day and the ups and downs? Do you want it to be kind of serious, or do you want it to be more fun and playful and kind of casual? how much of your personality are you comfortable or interested in sharing? And I will also say, like, don't feel pressured to like decide on any of these things and then feel like that has to be it for the rest of your social media career. It's okay to change over time, but you have to start somewhere. And so what I suggest is take 30 seconds to think about the above, maybe like as we're opening the breakout rooms, and just write down a few words to yourself to kind of summarize, like, well, how do I want people to perceive me online? And then we'll go into breakout rooms again, maybe for, how was that early? Was 5 minutes long enough, or do you prefer a little longer? Okay, welcome back. So if you would, again, I would love to hear what came up in your breakout rooms around this idea of how you want to be perceived on social media. So what were some of the conversations that you had, thoughts, concerns? You can share them in the chat or feel free to speak up on the mic as well.
So our group was pretty much in agreement that we wanted to be more casual, but we were also unsure of like the idea of being like cultivating our personal brand feels disingenuous. So like, how do you organically engage in the community without, you know, forcing engagement? That seems kind of like weird.
Okay, yeah, great question. Like, how do you be real, essentially, to the degree that you want to be? And I like that you've brought up this idea, like, you don't want to feel disingenuous. That makes perfect sense. So in deciding like how much, or like how curated you want your social media to be, you can kind of choose like how much of you want to be like a brand and how much you just want to be yourself. I think that there's room for overlap between those two things, but they can also be separate too. If you're cultivating yourself like as like Amanda Freise, the brand, then I'm probably going to want to really think about, that's probably something you're going to want to do if you're really trying to make your social media presence like actively and often serve you well in some kind of professional way, as rather than leaving it as more like a back burner. So for instance, there are a number of people who do science communication, science art, they make videos, like they themselves are the product because they're making content that then eventually pays them, for instance, if people watch enough of their videos. So because they themselves are the product in that sense, they really do have to make themselves a brand. If you plan to use social media more as like a kind of like a side tool to help you find community and, you know, advance your career, you probably don't need to think of yourself quite as much of a brand, but you can think of yourself more as like, you know, a human being who is using this tool to connect with other people. You may not need to then like curate that image quite as much. So I think when it comes to deciding how much to be a brand, it depends on how you want to use social media and what your ultimate career goals are. Most people in a group would like a mix of both professional and casual. Okay. Some people preferred professional and personal accounts to be completely separate. Okay, also fair. So none of these is a wrong way to use social media as a scientist. You can totally decide how much mixing of the two you want to do or not at all. Someone said I wanted to find a way to be both. Okay, so it's tricky to find this balance if you want it to be a mix. One piece of advice that I was sharing with my group is that you can always start more professional and then become more casual or more personal as you go. And it's hard to do that the other way around. So if it feels like safer or more comfortable to not reveal quite as much to begin, and you want to kind of then like test the waters and see how that goes, you can totally do that. And another thing we talked about is sort of the pressure to get this perception by other people of you like just right. But think of this too as something that can evolve and change over time. And one post or like the way that you've written your profile in one day is not going to like totally throw this off. Think of this as the long game. So it's okay to not be sure, and it's also okay to like try different things. If you write something and you're like, okay, I really didn't like the way, like I don't feel like that fits with what I want people to see from me on the internet, you can always delete it. That's okay. So this is something that will change and evolve over time, but it's good to go into making the account just thinking about it, and that way you can kind of try to craft your the way that you want to share yourself and also the people that you want to be seeing you, to make those two things like try to kind of like merge together. All right, so I'm going, now that you've made your accounts and started to think about how you want to be perceived, I'm going to talk a little bit more about some goals that are relevant to networking and community, and then we'll take another break and we will actually start to create some posts and do a little practice there. And I'm sorry I didn't say this before, but of course, if you have any questions as you go, please feel free to interrupt me and I'll pause and take your questions. So we've touched on this, and I think everybody is probably aware of the potential for it's a huge opportunity in social media for networking and community, like way more than I ever imagined. So for example, graduate students are super active on social media talking about the trials and tribulations of graduate school. One of my favorite hashtags to follow on Twitter is PhD chat. It's a bunch of PhD students, some people who have finished their PhDs, talking about grad school. And a lot of people are, you know, some people, depending on, again, how they feel comfortable being perceived, some people are very vulnerable. And that can be actually kind of a gift to let other people witness you in anything that you're dealing with at the time. And it also makes other people feel that they're not alone. So for example, This person has written, what I now have above my desk when I am writing research paper drafts. Done is better than perfect, something that we've probably all encountered, or if you haven't yet, you definitely will. Like sometimes you just have to get it done. But there's also people saying, hey, I'm struggling. Wow, my PI is like really giving me a hard time. I don't know how to deal with this thing. And then there's advice and community and support for whatever it is you're going through. There's also celebration. So people publishing, I got my first paper, I had a great presentation. All of those things just feel good to be able to connect with people over. And this isn't just limited to graduate students. Academia in general is pretty active on Twitter. So there's an account called Academic Chatter, which will just retweet what people say when they add the hashtag academic Twitter. So anytime you just need some academic community, you can follow this account and or this hashtag and just see what people are talking about. And again, it's a variety of things. So somebody was mentioning, I'm not sure how I want to put myself out there, but I'm gonna maybe like lurk and see what other people are doing to kind of get a sense of like what they do. This is a great way to do that. So if you don't know, not sure how much I want to share about my day-to-day life, that's okay if you're not sure. See what other people are doing, and then you can kind of figure out what feels right to you. And it can be, again, everything from writing papers to TAing to this person is looking for inspiration about what to listen to when they were, I assume, like writing on something academic because they shared this in these two hashtags. So lots of potential for networking and community in a supportive sense. And in addition, the networking can also go so far as to get you your next job. So these are just like 2 tweets that I found just yesterday, looking in like 5 minutes, about people hiring for academic positions. So tenure track professors, this person, if you are working on C. elegans molecular genetics or whatever it is you're working on, find other people that are working on that same field on Twitter, and suddenly you will have expanded your academic network in a way that may someday lead to more collaborations, potentially jobs, and so on. So those interactions, again, you can decide if you want them to be super professional or maybe a little bit more casual, but just knowing who these people are and them recognizing your name in these niche fields it's going to get your name out there more and potentially even lead to connections like this that might someday lead to jobs or grants or anything like that. And another reason to get involved with social media is you're already on the internet. You already have an online presence, whether you like it or not. So you should control it. Control what people see when they look you up. The first thing that anybody is going to do, like in a professional sense, hopefully not in like a weird sense, is if they want to learn more about you, they're going to Google you. Like that's just what we do nowadays. We Google things we want to learn more about. So I actually have it as an activity for you now. Try Googling your name right now and look at what comes up. Check out the first 2 pages of results. So take a couple minutes to do this. I'll put myself on mute so you can do it. And I'm just curious to know in the chat, like what comes up when you Google yourself? What are the search results? And what do you think other people, how will they perceive this of you? How will they perceive you based on the search results? What is near the top of the list? Is there anything you want to remove, change, or make private? And already a couple people have noted some issues. So Chris has a common name. If that's the case, then that's useful knowledge for you because you may then want to, if you have, for example, a middle initial, maybe you want to publish using a middle initial to distinguish yourself from other people that use the same name. Or maybe there's some other way, if you want to use social media or if you want to control your online presence, maybe there's some other way that you can like start referring to yourself online that will set you apart from other people with the same name. So even that, it can be useful information. All right, so I'm going to give you a sec to Google yourself. And if anybody has comments or wants to share, feel free to drop them in the chat and see what you find. Erin, exactly. So Erin, without her middle initial, tons of results that aren't her, but with her middle initial, top result is the LinkedIn. So Erin, what might serve you well then is to always, in anything academic or professional, always include your middle initial. LinkedIn comes up, okay, so that's good. That means you can polish up your LinkedIn, which is yet another social media platform, to really, knowing that that's what people are going to see, make sure your LinkedIn looks good. I'm basically doing too many Michaels. You do have a common name, Michael, but maybe a middle initial might help. Orchid comes up, okay. All right. Twitter is first result for Genesis. Okay, so people are going to go to your Twitter to learn more about you, Genesis. Somebody has an imposter James, who appears to be a dolphins rights lawyer. Amazing. First entry, a webpage of a research group. I don't work there anymore. So Estella, if you want, like if that's something that you don't want to be associated with, you can ask them like, hey, could you remove this so that, or maybe like have them list you as alumni or something like that. Great, awesome. Okay. And in reference to the dolphin rights lawyer, it could be worse. So I tested this out by Googling a few of my former TAs' names, and one of them, unfortunately, he shared a name with somebody that had just been like arrested for pedophilia. So that TA should definitely start using his middle initial just so that there's like some separation between, like, it was just a bunch of news stories about this arrest, which was like very, very unfortunate. So this is what I'm talking about by controlling your online presence. Matthew says, do you think it is good or bad to have a unique name? I think it's good, but you should definitely do this like controlling of your online presence, because it means that people will find you right away. So yeah, Alice says, Matt, depends on if you're hiding something. Exactly. So knowing that your name, like knowing that people will find you if they Google you, take some of these steps to make sure that what comes up is what you want people to see. So LinkedIn is a great place to start. LinkedIn, I'm not talking too much about LinkedIn today, but it is a form of social media. And I feel like it's sort of just like a necessity to have one. People expect it. It is beneficial in that if people Google you, they will see like a professional representation of you, which can be good. So if you don't have a LinkedIn, you should probably make one, but don't feel like you need to. I never look at my LinkedIn. I just update it like once a year, but it does come up when people search for me. So it's nice knowing that I have this like professional representation of myself. And this is really good. So many of you, your experience with the Penn, the Penn Science Policy, I'm going to forget the acronym, I'm so sorry, but the group that you're working with right now, if that's coming up, that shows people that you have dedicated your time and energy to doing something that is like actually quite impressive. Like I was super impressed by the website. So that's great as well. You can create websites and then direct people to them to help you, shift what comes up in these search results. So for instance, this year, I created a website for myself that's just my name. And that way I can control, if people Google my name, like probably one of the first things they'll see is this website that I've like completely, I have total say over what goes on there. So I talk about myself, I have my CV on there. You can do that too if you want. There's a lot of free website hosting. Again, it takes a little bit of time to get it set up, but then you can just leave it alone. And it kind of exists as an online presence for you. Laura, you said if somebody else Googles you, won't it be different because your computer has like cookies maybe that track what you usually search? Yeah, okay, Chris already says you can do a private browsing search, yeah. Yes, exactly, so try to do it in incognito mode. Okay, so I'm gonna move on from this, but I like this exercise because it's interesting to see what comes up. There was for many years like an interview that the local newspaper did with me when I was like 16, where I was like, I love doing homework or something so nerdy like that. And for years I was like, oh, come on, gotta get this out of my search results. And it's finally down on like the second page now. So I'm like relieved that the super nerdy representation of me, of like a 16-year-old me is like down now. But like what I have now, what comes up for me is my work at UCLA, great. My Twitter comes up, and my Twitter is like sort of a more professional, but a little bit more casual at times too. LinkedIn, my SciComm Instagram comes up. Reviews of my class at Bruin Walk by my students, in which they're like, this class was way too much work. My work at CPhages, which is the consortium that I work with for undergrad research. Alice is like, yeah, I was. Sorry, Alice. You made it though. You made it through. You did great. So do this today, do it in a few months. It will change over time, and the changes take a little while. So if you do it in a few months, you're like, nothing's changed, even though I made a Twitter, give it a little time, it'll catch back up. All right, back to Twitter for a moment. So already some people have started looking at Twitter and making accounts, and Divya was saying like, this is kind of overwhelming. There's a lot of things on here. So this is what I like to call the Twitter deluge. And I think of Twitter as sort of like a waterfall where it's like splashing at you and you're just like, oh, this is too much, I can't handle it. So as you follow more people, the Twitter feed gets super busy, and that can feel overwhelming. Just let go of the desire to like read every post. Twitter is not meant to function that way. As you follow more and more people, there will just be too many for you to follow. Instead, you're gonna wanna use hashtags to see updates about topics that are most important for you. And Chris has mentioned a tool, TweetDeck. Yes, totally agree. TweetDeck is like an alternative interface for using Twitter that has way more power and control over how you can see things and how you can tweet and who to follow. So check out TweetDeck if you feel like Twitter is too overwhelming. And if you have multiple accounts, like a public and a private one, TweetDeck allows you to navigate that really easily. Julian, my old MySpace page comes up. Yes, I'll say. I don't even have MySpace anymore, but it's like a treasure trove. It's sort of an artifact at this point, so you could save it. Okay, so back to targeted interactions. Find communities that speak to you on Twitter or whatever social media platform you want. For instance, if you are a microbiology researcher, start looking at micro pages, and there might be accounts and or hashtags that are relevant to your interests. So for instance, these are some like really big accounts like AS Microbiology, NASA, NYT Science. Like if you want to keep up to date on news or issues, hashtags are kind of really where it's at in terms of finding things that are interesting or relevant or important to you. So if you are a neuroscience researcher, check out hashtag neuroscience. If you want to participate in a kind of a trending hashtag, some of them are trending, meaning they're really popular sometimes, but obviously that goes away over time. You can participate in some of those too. So there was one called Actual Living Scientist, similar to This Is What a Scientist Looks Like, where you can showcase, yes, I too am a scientist. Science policy might be a big one. You can play with whatever ones you're interested in. So when I was getting into Twitter and really feeling excited about science communication, actually I think I have a slide about, yeah, when I was a disgruntled graduate student, I really wanted to meet and engage with more people who were doing science communication, because this was feeling really interesting and sort of, I was feeling very impassioned about it. So I created this account, I Am SciComm, which is a roker or a rotating curator account, meaning every week there was a different person who would take over the account and basically host it and talk to people. And I was shocked at how easy it was to find people to host it. Like right away, there were people who were interested. And at first, it was people who maybe weren't super well established or didn't have a lot of followers themselves, but more and more people followed this account, and therefore the people who wanted to host it started to become more and more well established. And suddenly I had my own community that I had just created by making this account. So the point of all this is to say that people are there are lurkers, but there are also a lot of people on social media who do want to interact, who do want to find these communities, and you can start that. So if you're not finding the community that you want, start it up. Like you will find people who are willing to participate in it with you. And this can also just be good for your own personal like exposure and visibility on social media too. So because I started this account, I put my personal handle in it, and the account at the time in 2017, I think it had, sorry, I keep covering it up. I think it had like 7,000 followers on it because it got really big. And the nature of this account was that people were going to share it with each other because there were strangers who were curating it. By the time it finished, or by the time I handed it off to another science communication group because I had too many things on my plate, I took a screenshot yesterday. It has 30,000 followers now. So that's a community of 30,000 people who are interested in science communication. And like this took like a few hours a week to kind of, more or less, sometimes it was busier than others, but it took a little bit of time, but it was so worth it because I met so many people and felt like I had a community. So don't be afraid to start your own community if the one that you're looking for doesn't exist. All right, we're gonna take another break now, and your next goal is to follow at least 10 other accounts. So what I recommend is that you start with some hashtags that are interesting to you. If you're not sure which ones, try PhD chat, because then at least you'll know that you'll be talking to your peers. And you can, when you search these on Twitter, note these categories here. So there are top tweets, there are the latest tweets, and then there are people. So top tweets for this hashtag are the tweets recently that have gotten, or not so recently, that got a lot of likes. So they've been like kind of pushed up because they seem to be more popular. The latest ones are just ones that come in according to timestamp. And then people are accounts that have this hashtag in their actual profile. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to do that. And when we come back, I'm curious to hear from you who you ended up following and any interesting accounts that you may have found. So there are some people who are like, kind of science communication superstars. I'll highlight them when I come back. But for now, yeah, you know these ones, they're really popular. So you've probably heard of them before. For now, see who you find, see who you're interested in, and follow them so that you can start hearing what they have to say. And then our final step later on will be to create our own posts. So we'll take just 5 minutes to do this now. And let's do breakout rooms again too, Alice. Okay, I think everyone's back. So I would love to see the accounts that you found, especially, or if there's hashtags that you searched. And in the meantime, so go ahead and put those in the chat. In the meantime, I want to highlight a few accounts I think are really fun. So I've written them here on the slides here, and I'll show you a couple of them. One by Raiden the Science Maven. So Raiden is incredible. She has 50,000 followers, and you can check out her account and everything that she writes. Lately, she's a science communicator, and she is a molecular biology scientist and a third-year PhD student in science education. I'm bridging the gap between science and the public with music, fashion, and fun. So she is using this amazing blend of professional and casual, and kind of putting her own unique spin on things to reach other people. And one of the most amazing things that she's done is she creates these rap videos where she takes popular songs, but then she like rewrites them to be about biology, and people love them. And so you can check out her story here. She's like on the Forbes 40 under 40 list. She's amazing. So she's one of my favorite people to follow. And I really like what she's written here. I am very silly. I work hard, but I don't take life too seriously. Please remember this moving forward. So she's choosing to be her authentic self, and it's working for her because people are drawn to the personality that she shares on Twitter, and they're also like therefore getting exposed to the work that she's doing as a science educator and communicator. So you can check out some of her videos. Another person that I like is Darian Nguyen, and he goes by Lab Shenanigans, and he posts videos that like every time I'm just like, oh, he got me. So he's a lab technician right here, but you can see, maybe I can zoom out so you can see the whole video. His videos are just like, they're relatable. They're relatable as a scientist. And so you can hopefully you can hear this if I should play it. It's caption, scientists taking pictures for their next Instagram post.
Stay.
So that can be all of you now. Check out the rest of his videos. They're really entertaining. And he actually shared one by someone else here, which is another great example of kind of using science, using social media to maybe give somebody a glimpse into like what life is like as a scientist if you want to do that. So I'll play this for you here. TV science versus science in real life.
God.
All right, so those are fun. I know, I love that she put her glove on her face and she's like, oh, shoot. So this, you can see that people are playing, and you don't have to do this. It's just one way that you can use social media. You can play, and sometimes it's nice to have a place to play because doing the science can feel really serious at times. And so if you want, social media can be a space for you to be creative, to make a video, to take cool pictures and to share them and to connect with other people about even like the hard parts sometimes. All right, so back to my slides. All right, so did anybody happen to find any cool accounts or any hashtags that they followed that there were good stuff on? Let me just, it's okay if you don't want to share, but were you able to find accounts? Did anybody have, was it tough to find anybody to follow? Okay. Oh, lists, that's a great point. So Genesis mentioned lists. Genesis, would you mind sharing a little bit about how lists work on Twitter if you'd like to?
Sure. So lists are basically like anyone can make a list of like different accounts that they really like. And then they just like compile like different accounts into like a list that anyone can follow. So I have, for example, one that's called Puerto Ricans in STEM, which is just like a bunch of Puerto Ricans who do science. And I put all these accounts together in a list, and it has like 76 followers or something right now. So it's a really cool way to just like find people. And you can also see if you're on a list that someone has created, which is really nice. So I'm on a list that's called Cool Academics or something like that. So it's a really cool way to find groups of people that, you know, tweet really good content.
Awesome, thank you so much. And again, like if you're feeling overwhelmed by Twitter, the lists are a good way to kind of, because if you select a list, then you'll just see what people on that list are posting about. So it might be a way to sort of filter everybody else out. Julie says, how do you find lists? I think I can show you on my page. Oh, I feel like the interface has been updated since the last time I looked at this. Oh, here it is, lists. It's this nondescript little button right here. So there was a list of, at one point in my career, I was also thinking about becoming a therapist. And so I followed the list of Psychology Today bloggers. And then I also have a list of people who are working in sexuality. So if you click this, if you click right here, then you can see like, now it's just showing me tweets by people who are on the list. How do you follow hashtags? So let's do PhD chat as an example. Let's see. I'm accustomed to using Twitter on my phone, and of course it's different on the desktop, but let's see. I wonder if it's the same. Does anybody know how to follow a hashtag on the desktop version?
I use TweetDeck. I just add a column for the hashtag.
Okay, that's probably the easiest way. I'll showcase TweetDeck very briefly if I'm logged in. TweetDeck makes Twitter so much more functional. It takes a little bit of time to learn how to use it, but it really makes a lot of sense. Okay, so if you can, let me zoom out here. So it allows you to create different columns here of different data, basically. And so this is my notifications, which would normally pop up right here. Here is the list, the sexuality list that I put together. So all the tweets through this list are here. And here, I don't think that yeah, so this is, I think what Chris was talking about. You can just make a column that searches for a particular hashtag. At one point I was trying to collect information about jobs in sexuality education. And so I created this hashtag. And here you can see that these are all the tweets from this hashtag. Obviously didn't go very far, but you can see how to use that. So TweetDeck, you can add columns over here for whatever you want. Do you want it to just be the main feed? Do you want to follow tweets from a particular user? Do you want to see who has liked anything? So these are likes that I've done, and here are the different accounts too that you've worked with. So beyond the scope of the presentation, I'm not going to spend time going through it, but if you find yourself getting into Twitter and you want more functionality than the app or the webpage, use TweetDeck. It's worth figuring it out. Okay, so a few more reasons that we might want to, let me share again. A few more reasons that yay, more followers, thank you. A few more reasons we might want to do SciComm or social media as scientists. Showcasing the beauty of science. One of my favorite things to look at as a lurker on some social media platforms is to just look at beautiful science things. I always feel kind of inspired. And so this, for instance, is like a beautiful agar plate that somebody grew with a particular type of fungus, it looks like. Here are some mouse embryonic stem cells. So if you want to showcase like that your work is really gorgeous, maybe you've got like the best data in the world, you want to show it, you can use social media for that too. Katrina asked, what's your sense about being political on Twitter before you land a job or have tenure? That's tricky. So I wish I could tell you, like, just be yourself and say whatever you want, but just like Google, people are going to also use your Twitter as like a representation of you. So I can't advise you one way or another because it's going to matter. I think it depends on everybody's sense of how important like politics are to them and how much saying certain things publicly are. I think that there are ways to tweet about what you feel and what you've been active about. But if you are concerned, if you feel that the places that you want to work in the future are places that may look negatively on your political stances or actions, then you may not want to tweet so publicly about them. And I don't even like saying that, but like that's just the nature of being political in like a heavily polarized political world. So I would say think about where you want to go. If you only want to work at a place where they're going to like super support your activism and your advocacy work or whatever your political stances are, have at it, because then they're going to see that that's the thing that's really important to you. If you want to work at a place where you feel that maybe that wouldn't be so supported in the future, I would wait. I would maybe tone down the kinds of things that you say in the interest of getting that position. And then once you're protected by the position, then you can feel free to speak your mind more clearly. And as I said, that's a decision that like it sucks to even have to make. Like we should be able to talk about these things, but I think the nature of politics, especially right now, is that people will use any opportunity to pass judgment on people and to make biases about or have biases about whether or not they should be working for them. And so tread carefully would be my recommendation, or decide that you like will only accept an employer who's going to support you in the things that are important to you. And there's been a bit more about lists with Chris. Okay, yeah, searching for lists on modern Twitter is bad. So use TweetDeck, I think, is the solution. Another reason that we may want to use social media is making science accessible, not just like to other scientists or to the general public, but truly to everyone. So I was actually in a talk the other day about science communication and racism. And there was mention of like how when we're communicating science, like who is it that we think that we're communicating to, and are we actually being effective at that? So for instance, the speaker was making the point that when you communicate science, even if you're trying to like write it in language that might be accessible to the lay public, just by virtue of writing it in English means that we're leaving out anybody who doesn't speak English. So you can think about if your goal is to communicate science more broadly, or if your goal is to communicate science to certain populations, either who speak different languages, who have different access to education, think about how you can use this tool to make your work more accessible. And so I've shared here a couple of posts. This person is a fellow with this Emerson Collective group, and they're developing culturally relevant Spanish language resources to help Puerto Ricans stay safe during COVID-19. Super cool. This one is a post about science and disability. So scientists with disabilities frequently face intolerance and prejudice in their careers. On today's International Day of Persons with Disabilities, let's commit to making a disability inclusive, accessible STEM environment. So you can use social media to become aware of things that you may not have thought of before. I've definitely learned so much about marginalized communities, about disability in STEM, things that unfortunately aren't seeing the aren't getting attention paid to them within academia, but on social media they are receiving way more attention because people have more of a voice than they do in academic circles, which is a huge problem, but social media can be a way of addressing that. So think about using social media to make your work accessible and also to learn about other people's accessibility needs too. So on that note, when you are creating posts and when you're sort of deciding what do you want your overall account to be like, it's important that you think about who is my target audience. So if you try to just target the entire world, you can do that, but it may not be quite as effective as thinking about, do I want to really be speaking to and with like a certain group of people? So if your target audience is grad students, for example, like other grad students, that may then influence the kinds of things you will talk about and say. If you're targeting the science community in general, that might affect it. Certainly it's going to be very different from trying to talk to the public and do science outreach. So whatever you decide here is fine. This is your account. You get to decide who you want to try to talk to, but it is kind of important to just like have that in the back of your mind, like, well, who is this? Who am I aiming this at? And in that context, will it be effective at like getting what I want to say across to them? And generally speaking, I just encourage you to also have in mind, are my posts inclusive of and accessible to people of different education levels? So again, this is going to depend on your target audience, but if you are aiming for the general public, then is your post going to be accessible to them? Will they be able to understand this? Are they going to be inclusive of and accessible to people who have perhaps different accessibility needs? So one example is, for instance, there are many people who are vision impaired who use social media. And if they're vision impaired, they may use something called a screen reader where the computer just reads out the text. And one of the common issues that comes up here, or a couple of them actually, one I didn't write down, one of them is that images are not going to be accessible to somebody who uses a screen reader and who is vision impaired. So what you may see some people doing is writing image descriptions where they write out the description of an image that they have on Instagram, for example. And another way that you can help everybody have access to your feed is when you write your hashtags, separate the different words in the hashtags with capitals. So you can see my example here, academic Twitter, they each have a capital versus all lower caps. The screen reader knows how to say then academic Twitter versus trying to take the second one and like read it all out as one word. So that's an easy way that you can just make your posts and your hashtags more accessible. And think about people of all identities too. Like this is something that we should just do anyway, but especially when we are putting our public selves forward, like let's make sure that we are being inclusive of everyone. Not because because you should do that anyway, not just because it's public, but something to think about as you're putting yourself out there. So before we go on to writing our own posts. You may be thinking to yourself like, well, like, is anybody going to see this? Like, is this going to be useful for doing, for example, science outreach, if that's my goal? And so I found this paper titled "Scientists on Twitter Preaching to the Choir or Singing from the Rooftops." And they analyzed the types of Twitter followers that over 100 ecology and evolutionary biology faculty members had. So what they found was generally that over half of their followers were other scientists. That may be fine. If that's your target audience, like, great. But if you're trying to reach a more diverse audience, what these researchers found was that beyond a threshold of about 1,000 followers, the follower types became more diverse. So they included research and educational organizations, the media, members of the public who weren't otherwise affiliated with science, and they said a small number of decision makers. And then the people that follow those followers are also really diverse. And so the authors have concluded here that Twitter really does have the potential to share scientific information widely if you do a little bit of investment in the first place. And they say that you should encourage scientists to invest in building a social media presence for science outreach. Again, that's if outreach is your goal. If you just want to use social media to like connect with some peers, also fine. But know that you have these different options for how and why you might want to use your social media platform. So we talked a bit about the Google search. We've been talking about how to present yourself. And I just want to say again that altering your presence online, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So things aren't going to change overnight. And I certainly don't want to be like, you should dedicate all your time to social media because this is so important. This can be as important as you want, and you can put as much or as little effort into affecting your online presence as you want to. If you want to shift it, just start now and put in like a little bit of effort here and there, and those efforts will pay off over time. And if you are really interested in like kind of connecting to people on different platforms, you can use multiple platforms, but of course, don't spread yourself too thin, because this does take time and energy. We've had a lot of discussion today about like how stereotypically professional to be. And so like, should you use memes? Should you not use memes? Like how much humor or videos or, whatever other internet stuff do you want to include on your social media? And I was beta testing this presentation on my students yesterday, and they were like, oh, no memes. I save those for my private account. And I was like, but memes are a great way to communicate. Like memes are the language of the internet in some circles anyway. So using memes and videos and being playful can be very effective in connecting with others. You can get creative. This person, I have to show you, I was blown away by this. They made this video to describe their work at an annual student event, it looks like. Can you all still see this? Yes, it didn't go away?
Yep.
Okay, great. Let me know if you can't hear it. I'll pause for there, but you can see like this person like made the most of having to be remote for their online retreat, and they made this really neat video that is going to definitely connect with some people in a very different way from just like posting a picture of their work or something like that. So you can again like be playful. Using video games to explain your work is perhaps totally acceptable, as are using memes and etc. Of course, choose wisely. There was talk of like, well, what things are okay to talk about. You probably shouldn't share anything that could be deemed like massively inappropriate or even a little bit inappropriate. Choose wisely. Use your best judgment. All right, our final task of the day is to make some posts to actually get on social media. So what I recommend is that you create an introduction post, tell us who you are, and then make at least one post maybe about your science or maybe about somebody else's science. So did I write something? Yeah. What I suggest is that as you're creating these posts, use some hashtags, including hashtag UPenn SciComm, so that you can find each other, and include any other hashtags that are appropriate for your work. So if you're going to make a post introducing yourself, maybe you'll use actual living scientist. And the advantage of using these hashtags is that when other people search this, for maybe like the next time I give this workshop, they're going to then see your posts and maybe they'll follow you then, and then you've gained some extra community. One that was really popular for a while that you can search was Post-it note science, where people were drawing out their research on a Post-it and sharing a picture of it. So there are all kinds of fun things you can do to introduce yourself and your work. And again, as you're doing this, remember, who is your target audience? Who are you trying to reach here? Try to craft a post that meets that, what you think that audience needs. So what I suggest is work on the posts on your own for 5 minutes. We'll put you in breakout rooms again, but I know you'll need a little time to think about this. So if you just take some time to create a couple posts, you can type them up. And if you finish early, you can write a few more or find a few more folks to follow. And then once you and at least one other group member are done, share your post with each other for feedback. You can do that before or after posting if you want. You can remember the considerations we just talked about, and especially like, will your target audience be reached and will this post be accessible to them? And also, because I don't want you to stress, like, don't stress. This is just your first post. If you decide you don't like it, like I said earlier, you can delete it. That's okay. getting used to posting on social media and knowing like where your comfort is and how much you want to share, that's something that will come over time. So just think of this as a practice round, and then if you decide you don't like it, you can just delete it. So no pressure. And I know before we go into breakout rooms, I'll just say, like, we talked a little bit earlier about being nervous, like, I don't know what to say, or I'm not sure like if I'm adding anything here. The important thing here is just to start. So push that anxiety to the side for a minute. There's no need to create the world's most perfect post. The idea is just to kind of get in the habit of posting every now and then. Doing those posts will help you get over some of that anxiety that you feel. And if you're not sure like what to say, you can also just go follow more people. That will often result in them following you back. So just have fun with this, treat it as a casual thing. And then what I'll do is I'll pop into your breakout rooms if I have time. We're almost done, but I can give you some feedback on your posts as you make them, or you can just put them on Twitter and I'll be happy to follow you back. So let's take 5 minutes to work on this in total, because I know we're almost out of time. So I'll place you in breakout rooms. Feel free to brainstorm together if you're not sure what to write, and then we'll come back at the end of 5 minutes and check out everybody's posts together. All right, welcome back. So I know 5 minutes is super short, so that may not have been enough time to make a post. What I would suggest is if you feel comfortable and you'd like to connect with each other, go ahead and drop, if you've been doing Twitter or if you have a different social media that you would like to share like for more public use, go ahead and drop your handle in the chat, and that way you can all keep up with each other. You can also, if you did finish your post, you can search the hashtag #SciComm and find each other that way. But let's do that, and that way you'll definitely know some other people on Twitter to get started.
Also, just to let you know, I will be compiling all the things from the chat and putting them in the Slack, so you'll have access to them if you miss them. And one of the parts of homework assignments would be to follow each other on Twitter. So there will be multiple opportunities. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but
that's fine. Thank you for the preview of the homework. Yeah, part of the homework too is to keep working on these posts too and get some additional practice posting. All right, I want to make sure we have enough time for a few minutes of Q&A, so I'm just gonna, normally we would review some of the posts and talk about that, but if you have comments on how it was to make a post, or if you weren't sure, feel free to drop them in the chat. We can respond to them later. Finally, I just want to touch on something that came up near the beginning, which is like, is this another thing I have to add to my plate? I'm a graduate student. I'm already super busy, so please don't take anything that I've said today as like, message that like, hey, you really got to be doing this. Like, if you don't want to do social media, if you don't have the time and the space for it, that's okay. Like, take care of yourself. You don't ever want this to be like a source of additional stress or burnout from like yet another thing that you have to do. You want social media to be a benefit to you in your career, not to somehow detract from it because it's something else you have to keep track of. So only engage to the degree that you want to, like that you actively want to and feel comfortable with. Take breaks. I've taken like months off from even looking at Twitter because I was like, I just don't have the time and space for this right now. And consider too that some elements which you can choose to interact with specifically might also help to balance out some stress from other things. So if you are feeling overwhelmed or stressed, maybe check in with PhD chat, if that's the way you want to interact with social media for a while. Talk to people, people, like, whatever you're experiencing, somebody else has almost certainly been there. And so social media can maybe be a way of addressing that. So to sum up, please jump in if you want. We need you. The world needs your voice and your expertise, especially because there's so much disinformation on social media right now about the news. And so if you feel like you have the space to give information and your expertise on the internet, like this is a great way to do it. You can use social media to control how the world sees you online, both like right now by making a Twitter, but also in the long run, those Google search results, for example, will probably change over time. Network, find community, meet more peers. So not just the people like in this social community, this SciComm workshop group, but other grad students who are interested in SciComm and any other topics you're interested in. And then just play, have fun. Grad school, like I said earlier, can be a little stifling at times. It can be really isolating. This is a nice chance for you to merge like your identity as a PhD student with any other aspects that you want to share as you feel comfortable doing. I felt like when I finally got on social media and realized that like, oh, this is a space where I can be myself, but I don't have to necessarily let go of the work that I'm doing in science. It was nice to feel like there was an outlet to combine those things, because previously I had felt like, okay, when I'm in lab, I've got my identity as a scientist and the rest of me exists only at other times. And social media actually sort of helped me merge those two things, which was a relief. So that's it for now. In the last 5 minutes, I'm happy to take questions or anything that you want to talk about. You're welcome to follow me on either Twitter or Instagram. And if you have questions going forward, please do feel free to contact me there or via email here. So somebody has said, how do you deal with Twitter drama? For example, if somebody comments on your post looking for drama, do you recommend engaging or ignoring? Good question. Up to you what you have the space and energy for, and also how you think talking to that person might be perceived by others. So I myself, I hate drama, I hate conflict. If somebody is just like starting drama that actually doesn't have anything to do with the nature of what I have posted, like the scientific content, I would probably just block that person. You're not mandated to listen or talk to anybody on the internet or at any time. So you can use that mute. Mute is just to like tell somebody that like not see their posts, but they can still see yours. Blocking on Twitter and other platforms means that they can't see your work and you don't see anything that they've written either. And you're more than welcome to do other. if it's like a disagreement about the science, you know, maybe you can have like a civil conversation. But if it were drama, I would recommend just ignoring it. It's just not worth your time or energy, and it may also give people the perception that like somehow you're causing the drama. So, but you can use your best judgment based on what it was. Okay. So if you're watching the recording, Genesis says, I do computational research and I'm interested in making more SciComm content. Awesome. But I find computational research less engaging visually than experimental research. Okay. Ooh, any advice? That's a good question. I don't feel like I have the answer to that, being not super familiar with computational research, but what I would recommend is look at a couple of communities. So definitely the SciComm community, but there's also a hashtag called SciArt, and that is full of people doing visual representations of their work. So I would guess that you would find some examples of people who have done illustrations or visualizations of computational research, and or somebody that you could brainstorm with. This would be the perfect place to turn to the community of people who are interested in visualizing science and saying, hey, what do you all think? I've like run into this interesting conundrum. Any recommendations? And I bet you that somebody there would have a suggestion for you. All right, so I don't see any other questions. So I welcome you again to reach out to me anytime. And you can reach out to me too about things beyond social media if you just want to talk about grad school, or if you have questions about teaching. Like I teach full time now. If that's something of interest to you, please feel free to ask me, or just anything about academia, or if you're interested in sexuality, like I love talking about that too. So happy to keep in touch with all of you. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. This has been so much fun. And I look forward to following you all back on Twitter and keeping in touch with you on various social media platforms. Thank you so much.